Welcome to this special episode of Real Estate Fight Club. This is a series called What Would You Do?, where we talk about professional standards committee cases and code of ethics violations. Here with me today is my co-host, Rachel Real from Rachel Real Estate in Chicago. Hello, Rachel.
Good morning, Jen. How are you?
I'm good. Tell us, this is like an interesting topic I think we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic because it incorporates the code of ethics as well as fair housing.
Okay.
So we kind of have a whole lot of stuff going on here. And I find that this particular situation and this particular topic is one that a lot of agents don't understand or don't have a full grasp of. So I thought it'd be a great one to discuss.
Yeah.
So today we're going to discuss Article 10, which essentially covers the protected classes. So Article 10 states realtors shall not deny equal professional services to any person for reasons of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Realtors shall not be parties to any plan or agreement to discriminate against a person or persons on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. In your employment, real estate employment practices, you cannot discriminate against any persons on those list of things either.
I mean, that seems like pretty obvious, right? But then,
yeah.
But then when we're talking about like service dogs, emotional support dogs, like it gets really sticky. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Right. It's pretty black and white. However, the difference is where we find that there's a lot of confusion and a lot of misunderstanding is the difference between emotional support animals and service animals.
Right.
And where is the line between those two? And is there any difference between the two when it comes to a fair housing standpoint?
Right. Especially if you're like, yeah, I mean, this would come up often if you're like renting, if you're a landlord.
Renting is a big one. Sometimes also in condos when you're buying and selling a condo or something where there is a no pets rule. So that's something we'll talk about also.
That makes sense. All right. Well, before we
Yes.
get into it, let me tell you about one of our partners. It is pipelineprotools.com. And what they do is they generate leads. Like we all need leads right now, right? So they help us generate leads so that we can close more deals. So what they're offering to the listeners is if you go to pipelineprotools.com/fight club, you will get a free demonstration of how we've been able to generate leads. You'll get our playbook for free. You'll get an analysis of how many leads you need to generate in order to do the deals that you want to do. And then if you want to sign up for the program, you can. So go to pipelineprotools.com/fight club. All right, Rachel.
Excellent. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So once we're done with this too, we'll put together the graphic that we're going to talk about, as well as the HUD memo we're going to talk about, and all the different resources people can use to kind of take a little bit of a deeper dive and refresh their memory on this stuff.
Okay.
So first thing we're going to talk about is the difference between a service dog, a therapy dog, and an emotional support animal. So We've got a graphic that we'll throw up on the screen here so everybody can see it. Yes, we can see it. Perfect. Okay, so this is a great graphic just to keep handy on your phone as a quick refresher. Hey, can I, does this apply to a service, therapy, or emotional support animal? Yes, no, or otherwise. So we can kind of take a therapy animal or therapy dog out of the equation when it comes to fair housing. Therapy dogs are dogs that are used, that are privately owned. So I myself have a retired therapy dog.
Okay.
So my retired therapy dog is an animal that as a Labrador, I adopted from a shelter. Thought, God, her disposition is so great. She would be fantastic for therapy work. So I went and we did a class together. We got certified together. We never go anywhere without each other when it comes to what you're doing with the dog. So a therapy dog would go to a nursing home and visit with elderly patients, would go maybe to a hospital, visit with kids in the ward, in the pediatric ward, go to a grade school and work with kids in the library or a social worker. Those dogs, if I went to go rent an apartment or buy a condo or something tomorrow, that dog has absolutely no rights when it comes to fair housing. She's there strictly to make other people feel better. So
well, she sounds amazing.
She is pretty amazing. So when you're looking at the graphic, the only legitimate rights that a therapy dog has, or not even rights, but what their duty is, and it says it needs to tolerate a wide variety of experiences, environments, and people, and provide emotional support and comfort to people.
Yeah.
That is her job. Those are her rights. That's it. Nothing else.
Hmm.
So we'll take that column kind of out of our discussion.
Right. Because
So
they're
you're
not
left with,
protected.
they're not protected anywhere. They have no rights when it comes to anything. They're just really sweet dogs. So you now have service dogs and emotional support dogs.
Okay.
So when you're referring to this HUD memo that we'll share in the vault too, they're lumped into one big category as assistance animals.
Okay.
So that can mean a service dog or an emotional support animal. So a service dog is one, if you see a blind person walking down the street with a dog with the harness on, clearly that dog is a service dog. Those dogs
Mhm.
go through insane amounts of training, insane amounts of everything, and they are matched with a particular person who has a specific need that that dog has been trained for.
Okay.
Those dogs can go anywhere. So they can go in housing, they can go into the grocery store, they can go to a restaurant with you. No one will ever know that they're there. I met up with a friend a while back, just for lunch at Panera. Didn't realize until she told me that she's a puppy raiser for service animals. Didn't
Oh,
realize
cool.
that her puppy in training was under the table. So, and then of course I'm sitting here dying because I can't even touch the dog or pet the dog because he's in training.
Right.
So it's slightly torturous that way. But those dogs can go anywhere and everywhere.
Well, and they're like, I think a good way to think about that is like they are working. And like you said, these are the
They
ones
are
that you
working.
can't touch.
You cannot touch them. No, you absolutely can't because those dogs are focused 100% on working.
Yeah.
So we were at the airport not long ago and there was a guy coming through security, didn't have a visual disability, but I can only assume based on, or my assumption was based on all of the stuff that he had and the way the dog was dressed. He had a camo vest on, marked service dog, guessing maybe a veteran,
Hmm.
with PTSD, something like that. And that dog was amazing. Had to take everything off to go through security, sat, didn't move, no one could touch him. What an awesome dog. That is a true service dog.
And those
Somebody
are
in
the
a
ones that are
wheelchair,
protected.
protected everywhere. They have every right that the rest of us have. They have public
So,
access and housing access.
so does that mean that like, let's say you're renting, like you're a landlord and you have somebody that has a service dog. Are, are you allowed to charge like you would another pet?
Absolutely not. So a
And you,
service dog and an emotional support animal, neither one are considered pets for housing purposes.
okay.
So the questions that you can ask as a potential landlord to a prospective tenant are going to be slightly different between the two. However, service dogs, again, a lot of times there's an obvious reason why that service dog is there. Someone's in a wheelchair and they've got a dog next to them. Clearly, that's a thing. So you can't go and ask a obviously blind person or an obvious person in a wheelchair, what does your dog do for you? Should be pretty darn clear. There's
Yeah,
a
but
reason that
they
that dog
would
is there.
have some certifications that you're allowed and you should ask for.
Not for a service dog. A
No.
service dog is only a dog. Sometimes it can be a miniature horse. So, but 99% of the time it's a service dog. No, so
Okay.
those have the vest on. It says they're working. It's very clear that they're working. They're going to be
Gotcha.
the world's most best behaved dog you've ever seen in your entire life.
Okay. And
Because if they
those
aren't,
dogs
then they're not
from,
going to be a service dog.
they're not really like, they're not pets. You're not including them in
No,
your policy for pets.
no.
Okay.
There is no ability to decline a potential tenant based on the fact that they have either a service dog or an emotional support animal.
Or like you said, if
So
somebody wants to buy a condo and they have a service dog and there's, let's say it's a no pets, no dog allowed
right,
condo for that doesn't apply.
it doesn't matter. It does not
Okay.
apply. Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So an emotional support animal is a little bit different.
Okay.
So emotional support animals are going to be covered by the fair housing guidance from HUD. And if you have an emotional support animal as a prospective tenant, emotional support animals require some kind of documentation,
Okay.
because if it's not a seeing eye dog, it's not a handicap, assistance dog, it's an emotional support animal,
Okay.
which can be anyone's pet. Let's be honest, it's
Hmm.
anyone's pet.
Oh, yeah. All
They
dogs
don't.
are emotional support dogs.
I mean, I'm going to argue that all day long. Yes, when my
Right.
dog dies, I will be a hot mess.
Right.
But now they don't require any training. They don't require any kind of certification. They require nothing. So you can have a really poorly behaved emotional support animal in all
Right.
reality.
Right.
And if you're living in an apartment complex or a condo complex or anything like that where you have shared neighbors, you're responsible for your dog's behavior. So if your
Right.
dog decides to be, a jerk, or act out or be a nuisance to other people, you're still responsible for that. But an emotional support animal can be anything
Right.
within some kind of reason. I mean, a peacock moving into a condo is probably not a great idea, but
So then
they're not limited.
So then those dogs are, you're not allowed, like as a landlord, they're not considered pets either.
Correct.
Oh.
So you can have an emotional support cat, monkey, dog, chicken, snake, fish, you name it. It can be anything under the sun.
But they have
Now,
papers.
They have certain documentation. So if a prospective tenant goes online and orders an online web certificate from someone they have no therapeutic relationship with and submits that, that's not really going to fly. An online certification where you can go online, pay $100 and get your certificate that shows that your dog was been certified as an emotional support animal is also a scam. So those are not things that you can use as legitimate documentation.
So then what's the difference like between emotional support dogs go everywhere too then?
No, they do not have public rights. So they can't
Okay.
go to the grocery store. They can't go to a restaurant. They have rights only when it comes to housing.
Interesting. Right?
Yes. So from a real estate agent perspective,
what's the difference then between, it
we're
feels
really
like
looking,
that
we're
would be
really looking at the same rights for an emotional support animal and a service animal, but we as agents come across emotional support animals all the time and service animals very rarely. I think I've only had, personally, I haven't had one, but I had an agent who was working with a client once who had a true service dog. So we had, kind of talked through the, the rights that dog had, what the agent was allowed to say, not allowed to say,
right.
In that whole thing.
This is so interesting because it's like also a little bit confusing. The service dog feels clear. Like it's obviously
really
working.
clear,
Yeah. It's like obviously
Yes.
working. You're not allowed to touch it. Like that all like jives and makes sense. Right. And
Exactly.
but where it's a little hazy is like a therapy dog versus an emotional support dog.
Right.
They
And
feel
so
very similar.
well, and as a therapy dog owner, I don't have any kind of documentation from a
So it's just a
mental health professional
documentation.
or my doctor that says
Okay.
I need my therapy dog. My
I
therapy
see.
dog is for other people.
Okay.
Other people's therapy, not mine. Although
So
she's kind of
that's the
mine too.
difference. They have
Right.
this. Oh, but the therapy dogs don't have rights in housing like the emotional support dogs do.
Correct. They have nothing. They just get to go where people invite them in to, intermingle with either their students, their patients, residents, those kind of things. So I only had permission with my therapy dog to go to the elementary school.
Okay.
So we would go to the elementary school. We read in the library. She was like, you would have thought the president was walking through the hallways when that dog was there.
Oh, I'm sure.
I mean, the kids all came running out of the hallways. I mean, she was the queen. But yeah, she has no rights otherwise.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yes.
Well, let's as we're wrapping up the discussion, let me tell you about one more of our other partners. So as we're headed into the new year, 2023, a lot of people are looking at coaching. They want to figure out their path. They want to, grow their business the way that's authentic to them, whether that means doing more deals or having more time or a combination. So what we're recommending is our Coach John Kitchens. And if you're trying to figure out your path, he has put together a short, quick quiz that's free. Go to realestatecareeraccelerator.com and take the quiz, and that will help you get clarity on your path. All right, Rachel, let's wrap up this discussion.
So what I thought we could talk about are some best practices on how to deal with these emotional support animals for the most part, just because that's what we're going to see a whole lot more than anything else.
Right.
From either a prospective tenant agent and or a listing agent representing a landlord who's got a property.
Okay.
So from a landlord perspective, if you're representing a landlord, you want to have that conversation with the landlord prior to listing the property or at the time you're listing them. Explain to them what your best practices are when it comes to taking in applications, date and time stamp, and then forward them as they come in. Explain that the rules around fair housing when it comes to emotional support animals. Yes, you've said it's a no pets unit. However, if we have an applicant that comes in with an emotional support animal, we cannot use that to decline an applicant or charge them extra money, anything like that.
Okay.
From a prospective tenant position or a tenant's agent position, because there is so much misunderstanding on this topic as a whole, from a tenant agent perspective, you want to make sure that you counsel your tenant to make sure that they have the appropriate documentation.
Right.
So I recently went through an experience as a listing agent where this was a situation. The tenant agent that came in had all the incorrect documentation. So she was not doing her client a real favor by not knowing what she needed.
Right.
So, they submitted an online web certificate. I said, or a web letter from somebody 18 hours away that said I met with them for 10 minutes over the phone and then issued this letter.
Right.
That's not a therapeutic relationship, something that needs to be established. The agent then said, oh, well, she's waiting on her internet certificate. I said, well, that also is not enough. From a tenant agent perspective, you want to make sure that you are putting your client in a position not to have a landlord discriminate against them unnecessarily.
Right.
So if I'm representing a tenant with an emotional support animal, my position is we're not going to say anything about this emotional support animal. We're not turning in any documentation at this point. We're going to apply like you don't have a pet because you don't.
Right. It's not considered a pet.
Exactly. Don't give that landlord any reason to discriminate against you.
Right.
Go through the whole thing. Once they say, yes, you've been approved. Okay, by the way, I have an emotional support animal. Here is the documentation. Make sure it's correct. Make sure it's valid and current. They cannot now backtrack and say, now you don't have the apartment because of that or the unit.
Right.
So set your prospective tenant up for success by making sure that you don't give away that information too early and give somebody a reason to decline you for that reason.
Right. That makes sense. Well,
and
Rachel,
as an agent, and also as an agent, if you have a client, landlord specifically, that says, hey, I don't want an emotional support animal. What do we got to do to get out of this? And I just had it happen. My answer to that was, after multiple hours of phone calls trying to get off the ugly merry-go-round of the fair housing violation, I said,
right.
I can no longer help you. I need
Right.
to terminate our listing agreement. I cannot participate in that.
But that's why it's important to have the conversation up front. Like,
absolutely.
Here's the
I was
difference.
Glad we had that conversation up front.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
But I can understand. That's that's tough.
It is. And, I ended up contacting our legal hotline in the state I'm in. And I said, okay, I want to unilaterally cancel my listing agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. They said that is not a problem. Document it for just to cover your rear. Have your attorney write the same thing on his own letterhead and say, we're unilaterally canceling the listing agreement. Because you've asked the agent to participate in violations of fair housing.
Right. Exactly. Well, Rachel, if people have a referral for you in Chicago, what is the best way to get hold of you?
Best way to reach me is by cell phone at 630-542-8688 or via email at rreal@dealwithreal.com.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Bye. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a podcast.